To present urban livestock do's and don'ts, please welcome University of Maryland Extension educators Neith Little and Jeff Semler.
I think this is what I need. Hi. So I'm Neith, and this is my colleague Jeff, who has graciously agreed to share his livestock knowledge, because I'm actually more of a crops person. But my role in Extension is I am an Extension agent specifically for urban farmers in Baltimore, in Maryland, particularly Baltimore, and this is a new position. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today. We're excited to be here. Jeff's going to talk a little bit more later about what Extension is if you're not familiar with it, but just to give you a brief summary, Extension, every land-grant university, and each state has at least one land-grant university. Every land-grant university has an extension department, and our role is to extend the research and the education at the university to the rest of the population and make sure everyone benefits. Not even just the individuals we work with, but also the communities that they live and work in. And we also have a role in connecting the people we work with to other services, like the USDA, Farm Service Agency, and the NRCS. So we've been asked here today to talk with you a little bit about livestock production in an urban context in a very short amount of time. So what my goal is to give you enough of an overview that coming away from this talk, you'll have an idea of what questions you want to ask next and an idea of where you can go to get them answered. All right, I'm not sure which button will make this happen. Not that one. How about that one? How about this button? I'm running out of buttons. Anybody know which button makes the slides go forward?
This Gamos.
Oh, it's the big one. There we go. I apologize. Woke you up. All right. So in an urban setting, there are several types of livestock that people might want to keep, and they might be in a more personal consumption situation, or they might be a commercial agricultural venture. Many places like Baltimore have have permits that allow you to keep backyard chickens. Aquaponics, fish production, is another form of livestock that is a little bit more scalable to a larger production than chickens, perhaps, in an urban setting, and I believe you're going to have a whole panel about that later. Beekeeping is a popular type of livestock husbandry in urban areas. Goats, actually, believe it or not, in Baltimore, they have allowed people to keep a few miniature goats if you want to and if you get the right permit. And rabbits are another type of livestock people might keep for their meat, which not everyone perhaps likes to think about, but is a traditional meat animal for many cultures. And a lot of people are really excited about the opportunity to get engaged in livestock husbandry in an urban setting for a lot of good reasons: to produce food for themselves and their families, to build a business, to provide environmental services, to improve their communities. But their livestock husbandry is a little bit more complex than growing vegetables and fruits, and can have some more unfortunate consequences when things go wrong. So we'd like to talk with you a little bit about topics that it's important to learn about before you get engaged in a livestock venture. Animal health and welfare is particularly important. I'm more of a crops person, and I've learned that to get a green thumb, you have to kill a lot of plants along the way. And that learning curve is not as acceptable when you're working with livestock. So it's very important that you think ahead of time about what you're going to do when your animals get sick, about what types of things they're going to need to stay healthy, access to a veterinarian, how much space they're going to need, access to food and water, how to protect them from other types of animals, like hawks or stray dogs. I've got a couple pictures. I think Jeff's going to show you some more pictures of different situations you might see chickens kept in. I liked these as an example because the top picture has a nice netting over the top to keep hawks out. It's got very clean and separate food and water dishes. The one on the bottom, maybe the chicken should not be living in the manure pile. Permits and zoning are also particularly important when you're in an urban environment. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about how you can find out what the permits are required and what the zoning rules are where you live. Neighbor relations are also particularly important because you're so close to your neighbors and we're all packed in so tightly. On the unfortunate side of things, if you don't start thinking about neighbor relations right away, you might end up being given a nuisance citation for smells or loud noises or your animal escaping and getting into someone else's yard. But on the more proactive end, I'd like to suggest that neighbor relations is one of those opportunities to build in the community benefits and start talking to your neighbors about the livestock before you start having them. And that's one of the ways to start connecting in your community better through urban agriculture. Food safety is particularly important. I've worked with farmers on food safety for fruits and vegetables. There are standards and best practices you can use to make sure the fruits and vegetables you produce are safe. There's the same thing with livestock. But it's also particularly important with livestock because many of the diseases that we have as humans, livestock can have also. So it's very important to make sure there's no transfer of diseases between the livestock and the humans. It's also important if you're doing a diversified enterprise of livestock and plants that you make sure there's no cross-contamination of diseases. There are ways you can incorporate the manure into your crop and vegetable production safely and do grazing on fallow fields safely, but it's good to think about that ahead of time. Manure management is important. I've got that last, but it might need to be first because your livestock will produce manure and it's a good idea to know what you're going to do with it before they start producing it. So it's dangerous to go alone. I'm referencing a joke actually, but I'm really serious about this. Livestock production involves a lot of different moving parts. We talked about a lot of different topics very briefly on the previous slide that I think are important for people to think about when they're venturing into animal husbandry. And I think Extension, I work for Extension, so I'm a little biased, so I think we can be a fantastic resource for people. There are a lot of other resources out there, including actual human beings whose job it is to help you be successful in achieving your goals. So I would recommend reaching out to Extension if you don't have an Extension agent in your county or city. As people have mentioned, they definitely, some people would like to see more from Extension in urban areas, and I'm really excited to see that, especially being in a new Extension position in Baltimore. By the way, if you're in Baltimore, I would love to talk with you later. And shout out to Civic Works folks I saw earlier. But if you don't have an Extension educator in your community, that's perhaps something to talk with your county board about. Also, we have, at the national level, extension.org is a website where we gather information from all the different extension professionals across the US. If you don't know how to contact your extension service, start by searching your state name and extension. It should pop up pretty quickly, and then you can drill down to your county or city. Your local zoning and land use department is particularly important in an urban setting, whether you're growing vegetables for production, for commercial use, or whether you're doing livestock. In Baltimore, for example, they have recently changed and updated their zoning policies and permits to allow the livestock that I talked about. When I worked out in Minnesota, there was an organization called the Public Health Law Center that did a policy scan of more suburban communities to try and find out what local policies people had that were relevant to agriculture in those communities and small-scale agricultural production, and what might be barriers. And a lot of these policies are things people actually haven't really thought about in a while. So things might be not permitted, but unintentionally, because we're using things for different uses than they thought about when they made these policies. So it's important to find out what they are, and then if they don't make sense, go and talk to people about them. Policy scan is a phrase you can search for to try to find whether anyone has created a guide to policies and zoning where you live. Policy guide might also be a thing to look for. The community law partnership, I think, in Baltimore, they have a fantastic guide to agricultural policy in Baltimore, so that's a great one to look for. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Semler to talk a little bit more.
So we're going to blow through this pretty quickly because I'm just going to give you a little very short history lesson about the land-grant university system, and then we'll talk a little bit at the end, or I'll allow you to ask questions because I think you'll learn more if you can do that. So really the land grant is tripartite, resident instruction, research, and extension education. That's bringing the research, and it's unbiased, it's research and science-based brought to the front door or your front door. Certainly, since I work for the University of Maryland, I have to say it, and so that's a land grant here in Maryland. Most states have at least one, some two, and we have an office in every county and Baltimore City, and that would stand true whether you're in Washington State and it's UDC here in Washington. So we do have local offices, as I said. It's information dissemination is our job, is my job. I tell people I'm better than their doctor because I still make house calls. I know generationally that's lost on a lot of you, but I do a lot of one-on-one consultation on the farm, or in this case, in the neighborhood. We do workshops, we produce fact sheets, we have lots of web resources. Every local extension office, I'm sure, has a website as well as a Facebook page, or a program area has a Facebook page. Some people even tweet, although the only person in my house that tweets are birds. E-extension, as was alluded to by my colleague, is nationally based. They're grouped in program areas, so if you were to look at urban agriculture in an E-extension and then drill down from there, you'll have experts from all across the country, whether it be Southern California or Southern Maine, that might have programs and questions and answers on there. You can, I won't say all, but in Maryland anyway, our local county websites has a Ask the Expert bot on it that you can ask the expert. It will send that question to your local office. But the question wrangler, who by the way is a computer, will send it based on to an individual based on their expertise. So I do get questions from all over the world, unfortunately, because I have no idea how to use sugar cane to feed the dairy cows. But nonetheless, you get those kind of questions. Just a little bit to lighten the mood a little bit. This is some. Actually, you can kind of go wherever you want with a chicken house, and these are kind of some eclectic ideas for urban settings. You can see the minimalist down there in the one corner, and then the very, I call those gypsy chickens, for lack of a better term. But those are some, I'd say have fun with it. You can, I'd like to this time just have you ask questions, but before I allow you to ask a question, as far as livestock do's and don'ts, do be a good neighbor and don't rush into it. That would be my take-home point. And I don't know.
There we go.
Great. Well, the first question, and I'll reread it, is how can local policies catch up to the trend of urban agriculture? That you just have to work with your local. I mean, it comes down to, in Hagerstown, which is the county seat where I work, does not allow poultry. So there's been an urban poultry group formed. They got a Facebook page, they got a movement, and they've been lobbying. I've been working with them. They've been lobbying their city council. So that's about the best way you can do it. I used to always say that you could have chickens in Brooklyn, but you couldn't have them in Boonesboro, a little town in Washington County. Now you can have them in Boonesboro. So you can change them. It just takes a little time.
Rooftop chickens. I don't know. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Well, the rooftop chickens, are certainly a possibility as long as they're confined. Certainly chickens don't fly like birds, songbirds. The other thing I will tell you is probably in the urban setting, aerial predators will be an issue. I've seen red-tailed hawks swoop down and take a pigeon, and I'm sure they like chicken just as much as they like squab. So predators will be an issue. But again, that would be a question, as Neith said, that you really need to go to your local government to find those things out. I will tell you, regardless of whether you're in a neighborhood or whether you're in the city center, in addition to policies and things like that, sometimes there are covenants, and you need to look at those as well.
What public education initiatives can, oh, it moved away, can help an average citizen understand the challenges and benefits of urban livestock? Sorry, could you hear that? I was turned away from my mic. You see the thing. So I'm a big fan of talking to people. I love learning things from reading, but I think in this in particular, you're probably gonna have to talk to people. There are a lot of really cool farm tours that different organizations organize. So if you are not engaged in farming yourself, I think probably have a look for some of the urban farm tours that are organized and go and talk with people about it and about what challenges they face and what benefits they've seen.
So you skipped over the pigeon question.
Oh, no. That's important. We can't skip the pigeons.
So it says, are you starting to see pigeon consumption as a food source in urban areas increase? I can tell you, at least in the urban settings that I work in, the answer to that is no. But it is not something new. If you want to know that for sure, go to the George Wythe House at Colonial Williamsburg, and in a back corner next to the stable is a dovecote. So this is not a new concept. It's just a resurgent concept, and I think it's one that certainly has some merit.
I should jump back also to the public education initiatives. I answered that from a personal behavior perspective, but you might have been asking it in terms of what's out there to educate people who are not in this room currently. And I should probably mention, I went to the tour of UDC's urban farm last night, which was fantastic. So they do some really cool stuff. 4-H does a lot of work with people, even with youth in rural areas and in more urban areas. I have some great colleagues in Baltimore who run 4-H programs in leadership and STEM and gardening and nutrition and all kinds of cool stuff. And so that's a great way to connect youth to things they might not get to experience otherwise. I'm sure there are a lot of others out there as well.
The question about interacting with non-English speaking populations, some of our fact sheets are certainly translated. I've used an interpreter on a number of occasions because unfortunately I'm like the typical American of my generation. I speak one language and I butcher two others. So that's the way we engage. And again, getting in touch with community leaders. In Hagerstown, our main non-native or non-English speaking group is Hispanic. And so we have some community leaders that are, and we actually have employed some folks in our office that work in that area.
I second that, community leaders. When I was in Minnesota, I was really lucky to get to work with the Hmong American Farmers Association out there. And they have a great education program of their own. And by working with them, I was able to bring extension research-based information through their leaders and their translators to their farmers who have a huge amount of cultural and practical knowledge, but had not been able to access the university's resources before.
I think we'll take the last question. Will be the, are there examples in Maryland of community-supported urban livestock? I don't know of any where the livestock is actually produced in the cities. There are plenty of examples of CSAs where there's eggs, milk, cheese, other livestock, even meat that are in CSAs, but those are brought into the unit, not necessarily produced in the city. All right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.